Those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
And welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world. In Libya, Muammar Gaddafi's forces have launched fresh airstrikes on towns captured by opposition forces in a popular uprising over the past 2 weeks. Bombs were dropped on the oil port town of Brega a day after clashes there left up to 14 people dead. Airstrikes today also targeted the nearby town of Ajabadea. Gaddafi has lost control of the eastern half of Libya over the past 2 weeks. The death toll in Libya is unknown, but thousands of protesters have thought to have been killed by Gaddafi's forces. In a televised speech on Wednesday, Gaddafi said thousands of Libyans would die if Western forces intervened.
Meanwhile, Al Jazeera is reporting Gaddafi has accepted an offer from Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez to mediate the crisis. Gaddafi reportedly spoke to Chavez and agreed in principle to a mediation plan. For more, we go to Libya, to Nancy Youssef. She's a correspondent from McClatchy. She's in Brega right now. Welcome to Democracy Now!, Nancy. Tell us what's happening in Brega.
Well, right now we're at the hospital where we're trying to confirm the details of what happened in Brega. It was such a state of confusion yesterday. They say here they had 12 dead and 28 injured. Among those killed, they said, were two Gaddafi soldiers who were treated here and eventually died here. They are starting to fortify areas around Brega because they anticipate more attacks, as are the residents in Ajdabiya. And they seem to be a bit emboldened by their success yesterday. From their perspective, they took on an air force and an organized army, and with a few ragtag forces, they were able to fend off the offensive. So there's a sense of confidence here, but also anticipation about what's next.
And Nancy, how extensive was the bombing that accompanied this assault on the town?
Well, I've only been able to see, I've seen 4 or 5 huge bomb craters in between Ajdabiya and Brega, so I'm looking for them now, actually. We've seen 2 at the university and 1 on the outskirts of Ajdabiya, so we're trying to get a count of it. And also determine who launched them, because some of the forces here are boasting that the rebel forces have confiscated an airplane, but of course we haven't been able to confirm that. So we're trying to figure that out now, but right now we think at least 4 were launched by Gaddafi forces in this area.
Nancy Youssef, can you explain who the Gaddafi forces are?
Well, that's a great question. The residents are alleging that a lot of them are mercenaries from Niger and Chad, who Gaddafi is flying in to defend him. In addition to the army, Gaddafi maintained a number of personal brigades that were really better trained and better equipped than the 40,000 in the army for precisely this kind of situation. And so, from what we can tell, it's a mix of some of those brigade members and mercenaries sort of organizing together to launch this offensive. But it's a little unclear. A lot of this is according to the residents, and so we're trying to find that out as well. But it seems to be a mix of mercenaries and some of these brigade forces.
And these mercenaries, there have been some reports over the years that Gaddafi had created, in essence, his own form of the old French Foreign Legion, only it was Gaddafi's Foreign Legion. How large a force is this, and how organized has it been over the years?
Nancy?
Some of them are more brutal than others, or purportedly, and they are by far better armed and better trained than the 40,000 in the regular army, and that's obvious as you go around to these barracks, particularly in the east here, where he was already suspicious of residents and seemed to have given them the least amount of equipment and training. And you can tell that the weapons they've confiscated are old and broken. In fact, yesterday, as they were getting ready to head into Brega, we saw rebels trying to grease and fix the rocket launchers that they had confiscated. So it's clear that the mercenary forces and the personal brigade forces are far better armed and trained than the rebel forces. So many of them are former soldiers themselves.
Right. The rebel forces, Nancy Youssef, is it accurate even to call them rebel forces? Are they simply the population?
They are the population, and large measure. A lot of them have training in the Army. A lot of them don't. What was interesting yesterday is there were people who showed up without a weapon at all because they don't own one. And we saw people with meat cleavers and even the rods that they use for shish kebabs, anything they could get their hands on to defend the town. It is a mix. It's hard to get at the structure of it. In Benghazi, which is the sort of temporary capital of the liberated East until they say Tripoli falls, they formed a military council to form some kind of organization. But when you asked residents yesterday what brought you out here, a lot of them just heard the news and came out on their own. Nobody asked them to come. It was all initiative on their own.
And the people coming in from neighboring cities?
Yes, so Brega is a pretty small town, and the next biggest one is Benghazi, which is a 2-hour and 45-minute drive from Brega. And in between, there's a town called Ajdabiya, and that town is about 45 minutes away from Brega. And so you saw in the hundreds of cars at the gate at the edge of Ajdabiya meeting up, and they would all cheer as a car went through with arms en route to Brega, and they'd shoot in the air, and this went on all day yesterday. And so in between each of those towns is vast desert. So people traveled from pretty far, and we heard reports of weapons coming from as far as Tobruk, which is all the way near the Egyptian border. And so there was a real mounting of forces and equipment and people as soon as the news came out that Brega was under attack.
And do you see any women and children in Brega and the sense of casualties?
Well, we're just at the hospital now. They said that a child was among those killed. I'm looking at the list now, and they say a 12-year-old. We haven't. That's on their list right now. They didn't have. They had women. They said that were used in front of the university as a human shield by the Gaddafi forces at one point. There was a family that was held. You see women at the hospital working here, but we haven't seen any women injured directly from the fighting yesterday.
Nancy Youssef, we want to thank you for being with us, correspondent from McClatchy in Brega right now. Thanks so much for joining us. Please keep safe.